Welcome to How To ADU with Derek, that ADU guy. We're going to talk about affordable ADUs, and he's going to share some controversial numbers. I'm going to put an asterisk up right up at the top of the episode. He has achieved some incredible things, actually building ADUs for decades and achieving really impressive costs. There's context around that, so watch the whole thing. Don't tune out the parts you don't want to hear. Derek, thank you for coming on.
Glad to be here. Yeah, I'm going to talk about everything that everybody else is going to tell you not to do.
I love it. I love it. And I want to just dive right in. What is the cheapest somebody can expect to do an ADU for if the circumstances are right, if the conditions are right?
Great question. Great question, Ryan. And thanks for having me. I would say you can start your process at $100 a square foot for an attached ADU and $225 a square foot for a detached ADU. And I say that with a couple of asterisks because if you have, say, building skills, or your brother's a plumber, or you're a retired contractor, you can actually cut those prices in half. And I don't say this to brag, I just say it to share what is possible. I am right now currently in this market that's never been more expensive to build in, building standalone, new, detached 1-1 ADUs for under $100 a square foot. And that's in the Pacific Northwest, where, again, prices are at an all-time high. And I'm spoiled. I do a lot of the work myself, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about ways that the homeowner can save, ways that the quasi homeowner builder can save, and then ways that just a manager can save. But that's the broad range I give people, is $100 to $225 a square foot.
So already there's a ton of controversial stuff in there, because I'm always telling people, oh, don't do cost per square foot, because it varies whether it's a small footprint or a big one. And I'm like, you can't set expectations really low because people get nasty surprises. You got to set expectations like with a big range, and you're going straight into that. So why would you talk about cost per square foot when so many of us are like, well, I'm scared of that?
Well, great question again, Ryan. And I'll tell you, it's because I've been building them personally for almost 30 years. I mean, and no offense to the amazing people all over this space that are adding tons of value and helping a million people, but it's just how the industry works. And I see a lot of controversial stuff about there's no economy of scale, and ADUs, the upfront costs are so high, they're the same price up to 400 square feet, and then they start saving you money. And I've just had the opposite experience. I mean, all the way from planning. Planning a lot of times is based on square foot. Design, if you go to a draftsman or you go to an architect, a lot of times their price is based on square foot. So when I hear these, you're not going to save any money, or it's not a good metric to use, a square foot price for costing. Well, everybody in the industry uses square foot pricing. So if I want a price for a set of plans, and I send them out to a plumber, and I send them out to a roofer, and I send them out to a draftsman, and I send them out to a carpet guy or girl, they're all going to give me a square foot price. Lumber is by the square foot. Framing a house right now, it's about $10 a square foot, maybe $15 a square foot if siding's included. So everything that you're costing in the process, with the exception of fees, impact fees or SDCs, I just call them development fees. Those in many cases will not be based on a square footage price. Sometimes they will be. Yeah. I know in a lot of markets, they'll charge you fees based on the percentage difference of the ADU to the primary. So I like square footage price because 30 years of actually doing these and building hundreds of ADUs, that's what works. And that's what everybody that's going to give me a price is basing their quote off of as well.
And so to put that in another way, just to make sure I'm reading you right, like when you're talking to subs, if you're going out and subbing out a lot of individual work, a lot of them are coming back and pricing their work by the linear square foot. And so you're like, it is linear like that. Is that about right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I mean, linear and square footage obviously are different, but I'll give you a great example of linear square foot price. If I'm going to build an ADU that's 22 by 24, it's got 96 linear feet of foundation. And for a 15-inch wide by 8-inch deep footing with an 8 by 24-inch stem wall, I pay $32 a linear foot. So for every linear foot of stem wall and foundation, I have the exact same, addition of price. So if I wanted to double that and make a 1100 square foot ADU, and it had about 200 linear feet of foundation and footing, it's twice as much. So the price is going up exactly per square foot amount. And a lot of people in our industry don't like that. And a lot of people that talk about ADU costing say that's an inefficient way. But I'll just tell you from experience in the industry, that's how most people are comfortable giving you a price. Even if they look at the project and they say, this is a 300 square foot ADU, and man, it wouldn't be a whole lot more to do a 600 square foot ADU, the subcontractor is going to give you a square footage price. So it's the easiest metric that everybody is familiar with in the industry.
It's helpful. Like I'm one of those people, right? I'm like, oh, I don't like talking about this, but you're putting so much context around it that it makes a ton of sense. And like if a project were really legitimately tiny, and there are certain things that are fixed where, like, if you're building way back on the back of a deep lot and you've got a certain amount of trenching to do to get the utilities back there, whether it's a big house or a small house, then you're basing the price on the trenching and how long it's going to go. And so there's
exactly
that makes it make sense.
Yeah. And another really good example for some of your listeners to wrap their head around is, it's like, I hear this argument. Well, there's a bathroom and there's a kitchen and there's usually a washer and dryer. There should be. And those are all fixed costs and they're very high cost, which is true. Like, you are only going to need one range and one dishwasher and one fridge. But if you have a 400 square foot ADU with a 10-foot long galley kitchen, cabinets, uppers and lowers, let's just call them $300 a linear foot. So you have $3,000 worth of cabinets. Well, if you have an 800 square foot ADU and you have a 10-foot L kitchen on one wall and a 10-foot L kitchen on the other, that's 20 linear feet. And you literally just exactly doubled your cabinet upper and lower price from 3,000 to 6,000. So it is very, very relative. Again, it's easier to understand if you've ever taken a lot of pricing from a lot of different people, because that's the language they're going to use.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I also want to take a minute to acknowledge an adorable dog that has poked its head in.
Oh, sorry. I've got two dogs. I've got Scout's the black one and Abby is the blonde dog. So.
Oh, I just saw Abby. Maybe I see Scout's snout at the edge of the screen. Right? Love having three guests on the show. This is even
Scout's
better.
over there.
I love it.
Some people think my background is fake, and then they'll see a dog move and they'll be like, hey, that's not a fake. That's not a Zoom background.
I love it. Cool. Okay, so that's a great thing to establish up front, and I think it shows exactly why Derek's a great resource to have on the show, and why you should go check out his channel. I'm talking about very broad kind of legal concepts a lot of the time, or programs or things like that. But Derek's built a ton of these, and just you have a facility with the kind of nuts and bolts, which also gives you an ability to talk pricing or negotiation strategies a little bit more. How did you become so knowledgeable about ADUs to begin with?
I got into the ADU world by accident. In 1996, I participated in my first ADU build as a high school student, where we built an illegal ADU for another one of our high school teachers. And in close to 30 years, I've built hundreds of ADUs. I've participated in the build process, planning, designing, financing, building, or holding another couple hundred. I currently build and hold ADUs for myself. So when I give advice on ADU over garage, attic conversion, basement conversion, garage conversion, carve out, bump out, or standalone, I've not only planned, designed, built, financed, and held them. I currently own every one of those types of ADUs now and manage them myself. So the kind of the experience and the failures that I'm going to share with you come from a real world spot. So I love it when people comment on something that, oh, you can't do that, or, oh, it can't be done for this price. And I always love to engage in conversation with those people, because at the end of the day, we both end up learning a ton from each other.
That's just really fascinating. Having said that, what are some of the pearls that you want to impart, like the biggest, most important things for homeowners to know before they start developing ADU properties? Where are the stumbling blocks that can't just fit into that nice cost per square foot, the $100 a square foot kind of dream?
Yeah, good one there. So I'll just say first and foremost, the best thing a homeowner can do to streamline the process and save themselves money is to self-manage if at all possible. Self-management is very, very important because you're going to be making most of the decisions anyways. Today's day and age where everybody's so busy, you're going to be managing a lot of the subs anyways, especially if it's an attached ADU. So I always tell people if they can, if their work, home, family life allows it and their skill set to self-manage, because that's going to be the number one cost savings tool you have. And the reason being is because the industry, if it's the architect or the builder or the tile setter, their goal is to make money to feed their family. They need to drive costs. Your goal as the cost, the cost concerned or the cost sensitive homeowner builder is to get the project done within budget and therefore create yourself some kind of positive yield. We probably wouldn't do this if it lost money. There's some family circumstances that would negate that, but for the most part, we're trying to save money as the homeowner, and everybody else in the process is trying to make a living. And there's nothing wrong with that, but they pull in two different directions. So I would say self-manage. The number two piece of advice I would give your listeners would be to keep a simple design. Do not over design and do not overbuild. That's probably the number one mistake I see people make is they build a really, really custom ADU. It's over designed, it's overbuilt, it's over finished, and compared to the primary house and compared to the neighborhood. And then the third thing I would say that I see people maybe trip up on is they don't have a clear goal. So they don't have their end user in mind. They may build it for one thing and then halfway through realize they have to pivot and kind of change their design to make it to give it more allowable uses, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. So these are more strategic than I was originally thinking, and that's wonderful. Let's kind of tuck in. So are those kind of connected to, like, do you use the market that you're in to pick your end user and then work backwards to what's the most popular or what kind of unit you should be designing for them? Or do you develop each of those things in a silo and then and reconcile them afterward?
Yeah, the system I've come up with, and it has just worked itself out over the years. I didn't design it on purpose, but I kind of think of it as a funnel, and it starts with the homeowner or the builder's goals. Like, what is your goal? If your goal is to put your handicapped child in this ADU, there's going to be a lot different plan than if your goal is to use it as your very first house hack and get maximum yield. So I always start by looking at the goal and then looking at the design and then looking at the budget. And the goal and the design should match the end user. So if you're going to design this garage conversion as a rental, I would be thinking, well, what's your budget? What's the target rents? What kind of long-term fixed rate financing are you putting on this? Are you going to allow pets? Because that's going to drive what kind of finishes we use. So it really comes down to, I don't want to say psychological approach, but actually figuring out what the goal is. And a lot of times people just want an ADU. I'll sit down with them and I'll ask them, well, what's your goal? And they're like, well, I just want an ADU. They don't even know their goal until they're asked. So that's probably and not to get too tactical, I can go with a lot wider brush if you want, but those are the things that I see people, they don't have a clear path or a clear picture of what they want.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So first off, just kind of don't barge in before you know what you're actually trying to accomplish. And then sort of sanity checking that what you're trying to accomplish, you know what kind of building is going to do that, and you know who's going to live in that building, and it kind of all fits together. That's kind of the top line for you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, for sure. And this is assuming, and I know that if people are listening to you, they're already zoning experts, but this is assuming it's even allowable use, because as you know, a lot of the people we probably talk to, they haven't done any research and they don't even know if their municipality will allow what they want to do. So I always say the very, very first step, and I don't disagree with other people that give different advice, but a lot of people are focused on money and finance, and you have to figure out the financing before you do anything. And I always disagree and say, you may be able to build an ADU in your zone and you don't have the money. You can find the money, but if you have the money and it's not an allowable use, there's nothing that's going to allow you to legally build it. So always start with zoning, but that's probably pretty self-explanatory at this point. If they've talked to you, they already know that there's a pathway forward.
I quote you a lot. Every time I say become an expert in your local zoning code, that's this guy. That's the wherever
cool.
the screen ends
and
up.
I'll just tell everybody too. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I've built a lot of ADUs. I have a lot of ADUs myself, and everything I've learned is from failing. Like I was not good at this originally. I was not smart on all this stuff. This is all just mistakes I've made over and over and over. And I spend, several hours a day talking to people all over the country for free about how to save just like misery, just like time and frustration of banging your head against the wall. Because when I started this journey, like there was no information out there. So the people today, I don't know if they know how lucky they are to have people like you. And I mean, there's experts all over the country right now that are really advocating for this process. And so I usually give that disclaimer first, like, hey, I'm not smart. I'm definitely, I don't even consider myself an expert. I've just been doing it longer than anybody I know. And I'm willing to admit I've made more mistakes than anybody else I know has made.
That's the key, right? And so, well, this is a good segue back to something you were talking about, which is, okay, self-management or owner builder, which is, I think, they're roughly equitable concepts, right? In California, owner builder means you're contracting it out yourself and you're hiring out subs, maybe doing some DIY, but either of those, it fits under the self-managed owner builder concept.
Yes.
If you're new, you're going to make some mistakes, presumably, and those are learning experiences if you plan on doing it multiple times. But if you're a one and done, what are the is there a way to avoid making a mistake so big that you should have just gone the other path and not self-managed? Or are there warning signs? Do you have advice for that kind of, like, should I be self-managing if I'm a one and done? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I would say for the first and last homeowner builder, I just want an ADU in my backyard that family can stay in and I can rent out. I would say just make sure that you have realistic expectations on cost, because anything can be done with enough time and money. But if you have, say, maybe short-term financing, or you have a construction loan through a local credit union tied with a grant bridge loan, like those are the things that I see that inexperienced people that are really good managers, but haven't done construction projects, the only thing I ever see them miss on is just time and money. So I would say to have a realistic expectation about the timeline and about the budget. And I always tell people to build failure into your plan. So we'll just use even numbers. If somebody wants to build an ADU for $100,000, they're going to convert their 400 square foot garage. I would add, 20% if you're experienced, and I would add 30% if you're inexperienced. And if you have a little bit of extra money left over when you're done, you don't have to pull it all. If it's a draw system, if it's cash and equity, you don't have to take it. If it's money that you pulled on a cash out refi and you already have it and you're paying on it, well, use that to pay down something else or do landscaping. It's always going to cost more and take longer, would be the answer to your question specifically. But that doesn't mean it should be a deterrent for somebody that's just going to do one project, because that 30% overage that you should give yourself by building failure into your plan is still going to be a cost savings compared to paying a general contractor to manage the subs that you're going to probably have to manage anyways.
Okay. And that makes a ton of sense, because you're saying there's margin for the contractor, and then the work of managing subs, just like realistically, it's because it's not some remote job site. It's your house or it's your backyard. So you're the one who's letting people in at 7 a.m. or whatever.
Exactly. And I don't want to discredit good general contractors, because there are some amazing general contractors that specialize exclusively in ADUs. And if they're in California, they potentially have been doing it for a few years now. It's not a super old, zoning practice. So there's not people in California that have been building legal ADUs in single family zones for 20 years because they haven't been allowable uses. But there are some, custom home builders that have niched over into just ADUs. They're amazing. I've met, traveling around the Northwest, I've met several myself. There are people that would be amazing to do this. And if you're not cost sensitive, I still think that's a really good approach. But most of the people that we deal with are actually very cost sensitive. And that's why I always lead with the self-management plan. Okay. I don't want to muddy the water there. I mean, if you have a good tech job in the Bay and you work 50 hours a week, you do not want to go self-manage an ADU in your backyard. Find somebody that's really good, make sure they have references, call the references, go look at their work and use them.
Yeah.
But a lot of the people I've noticed in this space, it's a very DIY thing. It's a very little niche-y, custom, artsy thing that people that are really interested in it want to be hands-on anyway. So the worst thing you can do is have some management skills, maybe have some construction skills, maybe have a brother that's a plumber and be really hands-on, and then hire somebody, because then you're going to be doing both. You're going to be self-managing and over-managing your contractor.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, again, my hesitation is always like, it's a broad audience. Everybody on YouTube could see this. And like, man, I just know some people, they should put they should use the system. Like there's a lot of value to the system. You're paying for expertise. You're paying for experience. You're a GC, you have a contracting background, right? Yeah. And so like, there's a value to that we both acknowledge. At the same time, if I'm honest, you're describing very realistically the process that I, as somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about this stuff, that's kind of what I'm thinking about doing, which is like, man, I'm a good enough manager that if I go in expecting to pay the same amount that all the GCs are quoting me, then there's a good chance I'll save some money through owner builder or self-management. And if I come up and I just hit that ceiling, that was what I was going to pay anyway, then I've at least learned a bunch. There is the kind of extra fold where I'm like, yeah, but it's my industry, my job. So it makes a ton of sense for me to think about it that way. But yeah, having heard that kind of confession or ramble, do you have any observations about how that applies to Joe homeowner or Jill?
Yeah, it does. Because the thing is, even if when I say self-manage, you may not ever pick up a hammer. Yeah. Your duties may be do a dump run every Saturday, and you're going to paint the exterior of the building, something that simple. But what you're going to do is you're going to be making the calls. You're going to be picking out materials. You're going to be driving down to the lumberyard to pay. And here's the most important point here. You're going to be hiring subcontractors, and it's going to start with some kind of site work or excavation contractor. Next is going to be a foundation contractor, then a framing contractor. And those first three, the first three that you talk to, you're going to find somebody that you know, like, and trust. And that person that you know, like, and trust that's in that industry all day long for years and years and years, they feed their family going to job sites and working alongside people that they either know, like, and trust, or B, don't like or don't trust. So your first couple of subs is going to be a wealth of knowledge for you. You meet the excavation contractor. Hey, who usually follows you? Who's the foundation guy that you've worked with over the years that has integrity? And you get their number. I mean, rock stars know rock stars. And you meet one or two good subs, and all of a sudden you have a Rolodex for everybody you need to build a house. So it's not as daunting as it seems. Even if you have a plumber friend that you know from church, or your neighbor across the street's an electrician and you trust him or her, you can ask them, hey, do you have somebody that you would recommend? You only need one good sub, and they basically open up their contact list and give you a ton of basically free contact information to somebody that's already, at least through one layer, has been vetted.
That's super helpful. Yeah, it's an interesting. I'm just I have to think a lot because you're challenging a lot of assumptions that people put out there, and there's the way you're doing it seems very common sense. And so I think a lot of people are watching this and they're like, Ryan, this makes perfect sense. Just go with the flow. What are the big things? When we were visiting ADs in Portland, you were pointing at, or houses in Portland, you were pointing out things where you're like, this is one of my favorite things to check on an early investigation of a property, because it's going to determine all of my sewage happiness or sewage woes or stuff like that. What are some pearls of wisdom that you can tease people with so that they go watch the rest of your videos?
Well, if you're looking at a property or you're looking at your own property and you want to figure out what cost drivers are, I mean, I always start. There's a few key points. Is it flat? Because grade is going to drive costs. Right behind that is how is the infrastructure on your property or the property you're looking to buy. So the first thing I do when I show up to a property is I look for the sewer clean out. Somewhere within 5 feet of the exterior of the house, there's going to be a sewer cap where a plumber would be able to come and snake your sewer line. It's called a clean out. And if you pull that cap off, you can look right down the riser and see how deep the line is. And the depth of that sewer line is going to dictate how far you can get away from that point without having to pump sewer. So grade, I always talk about sewer infrastructure of that house. Do you have a current panel? I like to tell people if your house is like 70s, mid 70s or newer, you should have no unexpected utility costs. If your house is 1970 or older, you should expect and budget in at least replacing, potentially, if it hasn't already been done, an electrical panel or a sewer lateral or potentially even a water line. I mean, if you dig up a 50-year-old galvanized water line, you may as well replace it with standard plastic or copper even. So the grade, the sewage, the utilities, and then the one that's not really tied into cost. This is more what I teach people if they're looking for a property is location. Location, if you're doing an ADU at a house you already have, you're not going to be able to change it. But I always kind of harp on location because it's the one thing that time and money cannot change in your project.
Brilliant.
So those are the big four.
I love it. All right, and those are big four. And I know you've got a ton on your channel. You do a lot of DIY, like you're just showing yourself doing some of these projects. You talk about a lot of stuff. If there's one video we can kind of tease people with, I'll put it up here. What video do you hope people go watch next to kind of get into all the resources you put on YouTube?
I have right at my landing page, there's a 7-minute tour of a little 400 square foot ADU, which is one of my favorite designs that I build. And I just kind of go wall to wall and talk about why it's affordable and why it's simple and how I build property management into it. And you can too. So I'd say probably something like that. All my content, I try to not go, film something that I think people will want. They're just questions I get. When somebody asks me a question, I'll just go make a quick video of it. And being the hands-on kind of DIY person I am, I'm always building an ADU. So I just try to pull out my phone once in a while when I have a second to just show a little challenge that I'm having or to show one step of the process. I'm doing a full garage conversion right now on a detached standalone garage. And the only reason I bought this property, I shouldn't say that. I mean, it's a good property, but one of the major reasons I bought this property was so I could show a garage conversion and kind of how it's a pain in the neck. But I'm going to be showing that every step of the way. All my content again is free. I'm not like selling courses or anything like that. I just ask people, if you do call me, because my number's on my website, if you call me, just make sure you've already called your planning department so you can do what you want to do and be ready to take action.
That's why I was very happy for you to come on the channel. You are obsessed with ADUs and have been for a long time. You have all the right vibe, which is you just want to help people figure out how to do these affordably, and it's almost like you're just fueled by that. Whenever I see you pop up on the feed, I know I'm gonna learn something. So I really appreciate you coming on, sharing a controversial perspective on how to think about pricing, because I want everybody to have realistic expectations when they go into these projects, but that goes both ways. You shouldn't go in and pay whatever the first price you hear is. Because sometimes it can get quoted very high. It's a cottage industry. And then it's very helpful to hear there are professionals out there who are saying, hey man, you could really challenge yourself to get this project in at rates that normal people say would use the word affordable for. So that's really exciting. And thank you for sharing that with us, Derek. Is there anything?
Yeah, of course.
Should I have asked you anything you're dying to let people know?
Yeah, a couple more things I would say, just again on saving money. A rectangular design. We don't have to get extravagant. If you can stick to a Scandinavian design, which is basically a rectangle, open concept with not a lot of walls inside, if you can go with a simple design, rectangular, one wall kitchen, keep it simple, don't overfinish, don't overbuild, and in turn you're not going to overpay. So I'd say simplicity. A lot of people, and it's not by any fault of their own, not many folks in their lifetime have an opportunity to build a custom house. And now with legislation that's sweeping across the country, a lot of homeowners are going to be put into the position where they actually can build their own custom house. And we just have to be careful to not over customize it, because that's going to, really make it more expensive. And I'll throw the caveat out there, unless you're in a really, high value area and you're not price sensitive, then build whatever you want and hire the best architect you can to design it. But like I said in the beginning of our talk here, most of the people that are watching you and me are interested in doing as much as they can themselves anyways. And they're interested in saving money because they're just working class people trying to add needed infill housing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our audience. I would give different advice to a different audience, but I think that most of the people that will watch this will relate.
Yeah. And people can self-identify, right? Like if you're skimming this video and you're like, honestly, it sounds like a pain in the butt. Like that's a good sign that you should, it will be, it'll be work. And if you could trade your time for something else, then do that. And if you watch the video and you're like, finally, I'm hearing somebody singing my tune, then head over to Derek's channel. You're going to hear a lot more like that. And thank you very much for coming on. Everybody check out this video where he's going to go through that 400 square footer and just kind of point out what kept it affordable.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.